Hey, okay, we're back. And so, looking towards the Battle of the Bulge here, I remembered I wanted to mention a link just up above this video dealing with the lead up to D-Day. There's a link there for the Ghost Army, and that is a webinar by a historian involved with the Stephen Ambrose Historical Tours organization. So Stephen Ambrose was a very famous U.S. historian who died in 2002. He was just infinitely famous as far as historians go. Wrote a lot about Eisenhower, helped get the funding secured to build the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. Just a very well connected person, and one of the ventures that he got into over the years was leading historical tours. And as he led them, he also built out a business to take people on historical tours. So I don't know if you know about this, but different groups do this. There's groups that tour U.S. Civil War battlefields, or you can go on day trips to, if you go to Paris, you can take day trips and take a tour of Normandy and have a leader in the group that knows the history of it, that can tell you. And so I thought I pulled this up real quickly here just so that you can just be aware of it. Now, these aren't cheap by any means, but they do exist. So if you're really interested in certain aspects of history, one of these can be extremely valuable to you. Stephen Ambrose was actually executive producer, I believe, on Band of Brothers, if you're familiar with that World War II miniseries. I believe it was produced for HBO, but it's available on like DVD and Blu-ray now. Another area that's really popular that people in the U.S. do is Holy Land tours. So they'll go with a historian, maybe religious figures, over to Jerusalem, places like that, to visit Holy Land sites. But this one, you can see the title here, has been going since 1979. And if you look here, this is the tours that are available. The Band of Brothers tours, Battle of Britain and Dunkirk. So a lot of these are, European based. You see, you have Civil War tours for the U.S., also American history. Lewis and Clark. Ambrose was heavily involved with Lewis and Clark history as well. So that one's in there. Revolutionary War, and one in Scotland. But most of these tend to be World War II because people are particularly interested in World War II. And I thought I'd bring up the Battle of the Bulge tour here, just because that's what we're about to talk about, just as an example. And so these are usually, you'll have like a resident historian that goes with the tour on a large bus, basically, and they'll set up all your lodging and all those sorts of things, and it'll all be set up, and you just kind of take part in it. So it says full-time professional historian, first-class motor coach, all breakfast, most dinners taken care of, and any attractions are covered. Not cheap by any means. Total cost of about $4,000. But it lasts, let's see here. So total of, so you get one lecture on day 2, and you wrap up on day 9. But you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 full days of pretty small group education on a particular topic. So if you are interested, these things do exist, and like I said, they're not cheap, but they can be really, really valuable. It's like when you go to a city, you can just wander the city, but if you don't have a lot of time, sometimes the best thing to do is just to hire somebody to take you around, like a tour guide. They can get you places faster, and you learn a lot from them quite quickly. So it's a neat thing that exists. I just wanted to point it out to you because it's kind of a cool thing. So the Battle of the Bulge itself. So the Allies push all the way up to the German border. So here's Germany right there. and this is France, obviously. And, they're getting organized. It's winter, and so it's, things are slow. But they're getting to the point where they're going to be invading Germany proper. And this was December 16th of 44. Hitler decides that the best thing that they can do right here, instead of fighting a war of attrition, one hedgerow at a time all the way across Germany, would be to try to break the Allies' resolve to invade Germany, and do so by breaking the Allied lines. And so they come up with this particularly bold plan to pour 250,000 troops across an 85-mile stretch here, catching the Allies quite off guard. There's a difficult, they're pushing nearly 50 miles inland into Allied-controlled territory, obviously named Battle of the Bulge because this was the original line, and then it created this bulge into Allied territory. But it was through the Ardennes forest, and it was an area that was lightly defended, and for the most part, catching the Allies unaware. The troops that were there were relatively raw troops, brand new to the fight, so it was something that the Allies would have to turn around rather quickly. So Hitler saw it as an opportunity. It was a bold gamble, worked initially. His commanders did note that it was very risky, and were not greatly in favor of it from the resources that history has been able to uncover. But it was, that's the path that Hitler chose. So the U.S. forces who are hit by this are scattered quite strongly backwards. It takes about 4 days for them to regroup and to begin to be able to push back. It's about January 3rd when they're actually be able to offensively hit the Germans, and it's just going to be a real slog. Result about 19,000 U.S. casualties. About 15,000 ended up being captured at one point. But it was much, much more costly for the Germans. About 100,000 were killed or wounded. They lost about 800 tanks to this effort. And after that, there's just no way that they can recover those kind of losses. The German, if they had maintained that group as a fighting force, then they might have been able to do more with it in Germany. But by going this route, losing that many people, losing that much hardware, the ability of Germany to resist the Allied offensive after they reestablish this line is significantly weaker, and the Allies have a much better time of it going forward by having dealt with this. But it was a great cost that they did so. So it was a great battle, great spectacle, really, that really did little to deter the Allies. It delayed the Allies, but it didn't deter them by any means. And they are, now ready to enter into Germany proper. And now Germany won't have reinforcements for a lot of the other areas that they might have to fight. And I wanted to pull one video that could give you a good sense of a little bit of the drama behind it all. You don't love things to be dramatized necessarily, but this one in particular, I believe it's a 3-part series that came out, and there was one that led up to D-Day, or included, I think it's led up to D-Day, and the second one that's here is D-Day up through the Battle of the Bulge, and then the third one is Battle of the Bulge through the end of the war. and it's narrated by Sean Bean. Sean Bean is played Boromir in Lord of the Rings, so you'll probably know his voice. You'll probably see his face in your head if you know those movies well. But what it does is it intersperses documentary type footage with a few reenactments of certain moments that, I'm sure they are historically sourced as much as possible. But what it does, it gives you a little sense of the personalities that were involved in this. So I've queued it. The link that you have here is queued to just a couple minutes before they talk about the Battle of the Bulge. If you want to, feel free to skip all the way back and watch the full thing from D-Day all the way over to the Battle of the Bulge, because that in itself is interesting, because that's the progress all the way across Europe up to the doorstep of Germany. And so check that out. I think it's a really good one. It's kind of engaging. It gives you a sense of the British commander that's involved, and Patton, and all these groups that are all these big personalities that were part of the fight. And it's to me it's quite fascinating to get to see it. So I recommend that one to you. And I wanted to give you keep my some of my discussion of some of this a little bit shorter, just so that you can have time to dig into that a little bit. And I think it's well worth your time. And let's see. Let me pause there, a little bit short on this one, but I'll pause there and then be back, and we'll wrap up some of the rest of this this war effort.